Andrew, thank you for inviting us to visit your layout. While we watch the train approaching Arkansas Junction, would you give us some details about your layout?
Thank you for coming, and always glad to share my layout with others. The model layout is of the Colorado Midland, depicting the railroad in 1897, and I was focusing on the second district, which runs from Leadville over to Basalt, Colorado. The size of the layout covers about 1,000 square feet. I have three rooms. A major room is 20 by 28, a small room is 18 by 13, and a staging light area. The track and layout is all hand laid. Switches, it's a proto-48, which means it's accurate for the 4.8.5 inch gauge. In depicting the second district, I have included the major towns of Arkansas Junction, which is the de facto division point between the first and second district of the railroad, goes over the Continental Divide over into Basalt, which is just south of Aspen, Colorado. There are other towns in between that depict the operations of the railroad: Busk, Ivanhoe, Thomasville, and Seller. And I have staging for Colorado Springs, Leadville, Aspen, and Glenwood Springs areas for those. The number of locomotives on the railroad are 13 that are all committed to running by the prototype. All the engines are scratch built and follow the plans of pictures of the locomotives as they were in the late 1890s. I have approximately 50 pieces of rolling stock, including three Pullmans, and the railroad used to pull nice Pullman trains from Leadville to the mining areas and serve the upper echelon people of society. The railroad depicts the 1897 when it operated through the Busk-Ivanhoe Tunnel for the first period. The railroad got into an argument about the payment and decided to go back over the divide, which is much higher, but that cost too much. And so it's an interesting operational issue, but for modeling, one cannot model the railroad over the Hagerman Pass because you have a truss on there that's 22 feet long, just that, and along other areas. So the answer would be to model the Busk-Ivanhoe Tunnel period, which is 1897, which I have done.
We're going to follow a train around the layout in order. We're picking up a helper at Arkansas Junction. Why is that?
Mountain railroading is always fun because you have the issue of grades and helpers. In the early part of the railroad's history, in the 1880s and early 90s, one engine would pull a train that only could carry about 5 cars, and this was not economical. So they put another engine on and double-head it, and it could carry about 10 cars. By after the turn of the century, they went up to 19 cars with three engines. Because of the restrictions of the layout, I was left with 12-foot long sidings, which would accommodate two locomotives and about 10 freight cars, or about six passenger cars, which I used. So to replicate trains trying to accommodate the 3-4% grades the railroad had, it's nice to double head, and actually the models will only pull about what the prototype would pull.
As we leave Arkansas Junction and we begin to climb up to Busk and the Busk-Ivanhoe Tunnel, the prototype had an interesting system to control access to the tunnel. Can you say something about it?
One of the most interesting aspects of the Colorado Midlands operation was through the Busk-Ivanhoe Tunnel. Crews operating the first district from Colorado Springs to Leadville did not want any part of the second district, which included the tunnel. The tunnel was about 2 miles long and on an incline about 1% from the east to the west side, and the engineers thought it would be nice because it acted like a chimney and draw all the smoke out. The trouble is they didn't count on the wind blowing west to east and would drive the smoke back into the tunnel, and therefore it would choke people. So the interesting thing they have is, of course, is one track through this tunnel 2 miles long, and how do you stop from having a collision or a tunnel? It was not unique to Midland, but they had a bar system, a retractable system where you would stop at a station, extract the bar, and it would lock the system up, so you could not extract another bar, and you could only go through the tunnel if the engineer had the bar in hand to run the engine through the tunnel. And this was the system that controlled it, and there was never an accident within the tunnel. It was operating perfectly safe. However, you did have the smoke issue, and even tried burning coke at one time in the locomotives to reduce the smoke in the tunnel. It didn't work, and we're back to the coal again very shortly. But it is a very interesting operation, safety-wise.
How do you control access to the tunnel on the model?
On the prototype, the system was located in the stations at each end of the railroad, and we pulled the control rod out to lock the system, I imagine, electronically between the two, so you cannot extract another bar. I am not an electronic person, so therefore I bowed out of trying to do that. However, I do have a set of instructions for the crews, the station agent, and the dispatcher, and they all have to be involved. And when the crew goes to the station agent to get the rod, they are given a big piece of brass rod to carry with them, and then they follow that around until the train comes out of the tunnel again at the other end, and they have to go back to the station agent and return the rod. This is the process pretty much mimicking what the prototype had to do, because the engineer had to withdraw the rod at one station, go through the tunnel, and then reinsert it back in the system to unlock it, which is what I do with the simulation of the brass rod. I made a nice big heavy brass rod so they wouldn't walk away with it.
The train emerges from the west portal in Ivanhoe and enters a passing siding. The helper is cut off preparatory to turning the helper. Can you say something about Colorado Midland number 49 and your model of it?
The Colorado Midland number 49 was the first in a series of 5 locomotives for the Colorado Midland bought from Baldwin in 1896-97. These engines plans are available in the Southern Methodist University Library online, and they provide a lot of useful information, but on the other hand, they are not complete. A lot of the information I had to glean was from photographs of the engines. I was able to build these based on the frames used by the Schenectady engines, and was able to scratch build. The major parts of the locomotive are all scratch built: the tender, the cab, the boiler, the cylinders are all scratch. There are a few commercial parts such as the bell and whistle, the pilot, the headlight. The domes are all scratch built. The tires and wheels are scratch built, and so the side rods. A lot of work, but it's also very rewarding to have something like this finished and able to run when you're all finished with it. The model also includes a different colored boiler jacket from the others from Schenectady. If you look at the historical photographs, it appears to be quite light in color, although no one can tell exactly what the colors are because of the photographic issues of the time, and was not well known. The engine has a decoder and a speaker. Soundtrack's decoder is in there, and it gives a nice set of sounds for the engine. One of the most interesting things about the locomotive is the piston extenders on these 5 engines, and were later applied to piston extenders to some of the Baldwin locomotives. When modeling the locomotive, the piston extenders added a new thrill to design issues, because as you go around curves, the front truck will hit the front of the cylinders, or in this case, the piston extenders, much earlier, and short the locomotive. Now, one could say, well, you could do this to do that, but the only answer I had to solve the issue would be to put a torsion rod in the center of the engine into the block where the frames would be for the front truck. So it only allowed it to go so far, and actually the front truck serves the purpose as a front truck would in a normal locomotive, and guide it around curves. They were able to make this work, and the engine looked real nice with this extenders. It's an interesting thing that only lasted about 20 years before they gave up on the idea that it was more efficient and less wear on the cylinders to have the extenders there than not to have them.
Can you say something about the diversity of cars we see in the train about to enter the tunnel?
Throughout most of the 19th century, the Colorado Midland was controlled by the Santa Fe Railroad. You have cars from Santa Fe on there. You have cars from the Southern Railway, Rock Island, Lakeshore, and Michigan Southern I have modeled, and a lot of other railroads that will appear on the Alta Railroad. Midland cars would go as far west as the West Coast, LA, and would appear at Kansas City, where two of the passenger cars were destroyed. It's one of the interesting things how diverse the traffic was in this particular time, when all too many people think of this as a proprietary system and it's only carrying in cars internally of itself. About 40% of the cars carried on the Midland were offline railroads, which adds a whole diversity to the operations and it gives quite a whole lot of issues of carrying different kinds of traffic on the railroad.
With the opposing traffic gone, the helper is now free to back down the siding and enter the turntable. Can you say something about the covered turntable and the reasons for it?
The Colorado Midland operated up on the pass at Ivanhoe, which is very high up in elevation, almost a continental divide, and we get a lot of snow each year. And so to keep the turntable in operation, they decided to cover it. Now this particular table is modeled in 1897 and is covered in a table of 60 feet long, which would accommodate all the locomotives types I have on the layout. However, when it comes to the 20th century, the railroad orders a series of compound engines from Baldwin that are longer than 60 feet, and another set of engines in 1906 were also consolidations, but they would not fit on the turntable. The turntable was eventually abandoned in a building Y down in the valley below the station, and the turntable was removed. But the turntable is an integral part of what goes on in my particular time period, and therefore makes an interesting operational issue to have the engine back into the turntable, turn it, and bring it back out again, and then it returns to the base of the grade.
Next, our train enters Hell Gate. The rocks and riprap in this scene are actually from Colorado. What's the story behind this?
One of the most important aspects I have in recreating the prototype railroads is to include natural materials. And I've gone out to Colorado on a number of occasions and picked up rocks and dirt from the various locations to mimic what I modeled on this Denver South Farmer Civic in 013 and this one in Proto-48. It adds a very nice texture that you cannot reproduce in paint. When you look at the facets in a rock and the colors and all the complexity of the facets in dirt to reflect colors, you cannot achieve this with artificial materials, and therefore there's no replication as far as I can see other than using prototype materials to model the prototype.
Malin Tunnel is an actual location on the Colorado Midland. Can you tell us about it?
The Milan Tunnel is the only tunnel west of the Continental Divide on the Midland, and you can still locate it if you drive up there. You have to take the Park Service Road and actually goes around the tunnel. You can still see the east entrance to it. And what was particularly interesting in the historical photograph of it is that over top of the cribbing there's a whole bunch of logs laid parallel to the track, which gives a very interesting and I guess somewhat unique appearance to the tunnel. I wanted to replicate that on the model railroad, and I was able to do it, although it was very greatly compressed.
Zeller was a station stop, but locomotives also took on coal here, and you've modeled an impressive coal dock, one of several. Can you say something about the operation on the Colorado Midland and on the model?
Zeller was a very important place on the railroad on the west side of the Continental Divide. It was about 30 miles east of Basalt and about 35 miles west of Leadville, and the engines could run about 30 miles before they had to be recoaled. Water is more available at 15-mile intervals, but the coal is important to fill, especially for engines that are going eastbound and taking on grade and using a great amount of energy to get up to the top of the pass. Also at Zeller, there's a sand tower to refresh the engines because of cold snow and rain, mist, whatever, all reduce the adhesion of the engine and require a lot of sand. Coal would be deposited in the trestle by pushing a gondola on top of the trestle, and since labor is very cheap, it would be hand shoveled into the fillers where the engine could pull up to the chute and fill the back of the tender, and on they would go. Also in the prototype is interesting, for the westbound trains that are going downhill, you have a 15-minute stop to cool the wheels and brakes. There are several locations on the railroad, particularly heavy grades, for this required, and adds a whole dimension to the operational issues in following the prototype.
In Mast, we pass a square, I assume, enclosed water tank, as well as a period-attired couple out for a picnic.
One of my favorite scenes on the railroad is a mast showing a couple of gandy dancers going by the water tank. And it's a must include on the railroad since I was modeling this particular area. It's interesting in Nast, it also is a most difficult part of the railroad to operate on the west side because there's a very sharp 180-degree turn and a drag coefficient on the trains, and also entering a full 3% grade, which would greatly strain the capacity of the engine to pull the train. The water tank is nearby the Frying Pan River, which is one of the best trout fishing regions in the United States, and is still loved by many fishermen who go fishing these days. And as I said, it had to be included, and also the flag stop at the station, and a great people place to go out and have a picnic and enjoy the day and go fishing.
In Thomasville, there's an interesting industrial complex beyond the station. Can you tell us about it?
In the area around Thomasville, there were several limestone quarries, and this is one of the few industries on the railroad between Basalt and the Continental Divide up at Ivanhoe. And they were cookers. It would break the limestone down and use the limestone either in bulk or in powder. It could be transported to the smelters in Leadville and used in the processing of metals, or also be refined, and used for fields in the Grand Junction area for agriculture. So it was a very important facility for the railroad and supplied a lot of industries in the area with the important limestone products. So it had a wide variety of uses. In modeling the kilns, I used to follow the prototype. If you were to take a trip up the Frying Pan River to Thomasville, you can still find two of the kilns still standing. And what I did was I made flat pieces and used modeling clay to model the stonework, and then replicated that in castings and made 4 sizes for each kiln. And it came out to be a nice looking thing. They said you can follow the prototype on that.
Basalt seems to be a big town on the Colorado Midland with a large station, a hotel, and a plethora of other buildings. What was in Basalt and what have you included on the model?
The area of Basalt, which is named after a mountain at Basalt, was originally named Aspen Junction, which indicates the area where the line went up to Aspen and was a huge freight supplier of silver and suppliers to the mines. Then the station, you have several pictures of the station in this included. You also have the hotel, which is a Harvey House, which is part of the Santa Fe system. And you also have a ice house. And when the refrigerator cars would come in there to be fed with ice, it had to be taken off the train and taken over to the ice house to be resupplied. There are a number of other buildings, such as Port the Railroad, that is a coal trestle, the sand house on the end of the coal trestle, and also, of course, a 50,000-gallon water tank. And so they keep the engines going. There's also a turntable that would be used until the engines became too large. But again, it's a 60-foot table to accommodate all the engines of the 19th century. But in the 20th century, they had to be pulled, and they would use the Y in the area. Now, in modeling this, I could not include the Y because the branch off the Aspen would go through the wall and under the garage, and that was out of the question. So I included the track with a part of the Y actually would feed the turntable on both sides, which enhanced the operation of the model railroad and gave the illusion of actually having the track there that went off to the Y.
We pause in Basalt for some switching operations. What's happening here?
The Colorado Midland had three 8-6-way switchers. Two of them were stationed in Colorado Springs and one in Basalt, and is well needed. During the modeling operating procedure, the switcher is kept in operation all during the session. He has to make up trains for those going to Aspen and those going all west to Grand Junction or going east to Colorado Springs. One of the interesting things here, you have stockyards and the ice house, so the stockyards have to be pulled off and put over by the stockyards to be loaded or unloaded, and also all the refrigerator cars have to be taken off and refreshed. One of the interesting things in O scale, and this gets the bigger scales have advantage, when you're actually running the locomotives in the yards, you're achieving much closer to the prototype speed and actually slows the pace of things down, and it makes a very long operation to move the engine from one end of the yard to the other. Whereas in HO and N scale, he's more inclined to turn the speed up and the engine goes much faster than the prototype. But the yard keeps busy, and it also has to switch cars for the coal dock.
Next, we see our switcher delivering a load of coal to another one of your impressive coal docks. Is the coal in the gons and the coal bins live?
No live loads on the Midland. I did that when I modeled the South Park, when the gons would go from one place to another on the staging. I could easily unload the cars. But these have to get loaded in the coal docks, and I don't want to pick the cars off the coal docks, dump the coal out, and then put the car back on the track again, and then switch it up. So I decided to make loads I could remove with a little handle and nail on there. One thing interesting on the coal docks is that the one in Basalt also has an interesting picture taken about 1900 showing a stock car at the end of the dock and wondering what in the world this is doing. And after years of looking at the picture and analyzing what's going on and understanding the operations, the stock car, I believe, is in sand service. The sand dock is right opposite the car, and there's no slat to hold coal in the car, so the coal would run out through the slat. So the sand must be in bags or some kind of container to use to supply the engines. So lots of pictures of stock cars having the sides filled in to carry such things as bulk material like mulch for hides, tanning materials, Stock cars are also listed in the rules and regulations book carrying all kinds of naphtha products, acids, whatever you do not want to carry in a regular boxcar where any fumes or leakage might cause problems. The stock cars actually are not a very valuable piece of equipment on the railroad because they're only used about twice a year, and the rest of the time they have no particular use unless the railroad makes special cases for it, which the Midland did in its rules and regulations book.
On its way out of Basalt, our train passes the self-same coal dock as well as the cattle pens. How much livestock was loaded at Basalt, and was 1897 before the era of mandated stock rest periods?
By the late 1890s, federal government and state regulators had passed a number of laws regulating livestock and lots of other aspects of the railroads. In 1893, they passed a law that required knuckle couplers and air brakes to be applied by the end of the century, and the 20-hour cattle rule had already been put in place. Basalt would ship several hundred head of animals, sheep, cattle, and even cows. There's some dairy farms in the area. And on the model railroad, I can have stock cars loaded there, or actually have the cars unloaded, get the stock out and have them rested in water. I also have the option to do that over in Arkansas Junction. In the operation of the railroad, it was interesting, one of the questions came up about time periods and how they move things. There was a case in the 1899 blizzard, which would be in January, February, March of 1899, that there was a stock train that got trapped up on the Hagerman Pass, and all the animals froze to death in the stock cars. I don't think I would want to be with a knife and a fork waiting for the thaw to have dinner, but it is one of the things they were still hauling stock over the pass and off season rather.
Finally, our train passes the Rio Grande Diamond before exiting the modeled portion of the layout. Andrew, I'd like to thank you for this in-depth tour of your Colorado Midland layout.
I also want to thank you very much for coming and listening to this. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I want to thank Terry Terrace for doing this for me. And this will be the last appearance of the railroad because it will be abandoned soon after this is completed.
These videos were recorded in December 2019 before Andrew, an energetic modeler, begins transforming the layout from Colorado to a freelance Maine railroad as he just stated. Please stay tuned for more to come.